Good morning. Welcome to our class again together. Today we are in Ephesians chapter 4 as we make just a small transition in the way Paul writes to the Ephesians. I'd like to begin today by showing you something that you're so familiar with you may not have ever thought about it. It's a simple rubber band. You've used these to keep various envelopes together or accumulate things in a pile that you don't want scattered. Now, kids can use them to do other things with them. They can torment by shooting them to other kids. But today I want you to think about it a little differently. A rubber band mirrors the way the church is. And that's how what we want to discover over the next few weeks, exactly how this helps us understand what we are in God's kingdom. Because if you put a rubber band between two fingers, like this, you begin to feel the tension. And if you pull on one side of the rubber band, it always affects the other. And you can't do very much until one begins to affect the other the same way. That is the concept of the church that we like to look at. We are one, and what affects one affects all. That's how God's body works. It's something we do together, not just in a physical location, but in life and heart. And so in this lesson, Paul introduces the critical thought of the remainder of the rest of the letter to the Ephesians. He's described God's excellent mystery on how the blood of Christ brings Jew and Gentile together as one. The challenge then is, how do we live as one in God's kingdom? How do we make the mystery a reality in the church today? Let's step back for a moment though, so we get a lay of the land. As we said in our last lesson, the prayer that ends chapter 3 is the bridge between two sections. So in the next several weeks, we're going to discuss the practicality now that we have discussed the doctrine. But further, we have a single thought in the last 3 chapters of Ephesians, and this section begins with another thought that will govern the rest of the book of Ephesians. That's the verse 1 where our lesson starts. I therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Now that may not sound as impressive as it really is, because a typical construction of a Greek letter, for instance, uses the word urge or beseech or beg, same word, followed by an object of that verb, and that is what tells you what the book was really written for. That's the subject. That's the point that the author wants to bring out. So Paul writes this book for a reason, and we find it there in chapter 4 and verse 1. We are to live out God's plan in the church in a very practical way. That's the point of the book of Ephesians. How do we do it? How can you take diverse people who have mistrusted each other since the beginning and put them together in one body? Once that's done, how do they achieve the oneness that God planned? And so in the last 3 chapters, we talk about how to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. That is going to be the thread that holds together the remainder of our lessons in Ephesians. How do we, as God's children, live up to the glorious gift of God? So let's start with the concept of the calling. The calling is the background. It's the velvet curtain that drapes the background of everything Paul's going to say. Paul wants to remind them of the why, which makes the what worth doing. A single set of verses in Ephesians 2 captures the critical idea of the 3 opening chapters of the book of Ephesians. Ephesians 2, verses 14 to 16. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility, by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in the place of 2, so making peace, and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. God's grace and power creates the ability for men, all men, to come together in the blood of Christ. In it, God made a new man in the place of two. Peace, true peace, occurs because Christ's blood paid for our sins. The work of God creates the conditions out of which true unity can happen. So we live in this new creation. But the second item that needs a little explanation is the term walk. The metaphor of walking is not far from being literal. We walk through life. It becomes an idea of conducting one's life. We live each day, and that's our walk of life. That's even a phrase we use today. What was his walk of life? And we describe a person's life that way. But it's even more important to realize what it means in this context. The Old Testament prophet Amos told Israel how they had departed from God's paths. And in doing so, he uses the same word picture of walking. Do two walk together unless they are agreed? For Amos, the conduct of Israel's spiritual life was out of step with God, and they could not walk together any longer. The Christian life is the body of Christ walking together. So Paul implores that we walk correctly, which brings us to the third element of that passage, and that is the concept of a manner worthy of the high calling. The word Paul uses is a familiar word in the world where commerce meant measuring and weighing things. It meant that which balances the scale. If you have something over here and you want to pay for that, then you have to put a certain amount of silver, for instance, on the pan of the scale until they balance. That's making it worthy. So Paul is asking all of us to evaluate your life against the gift of God in Christ Jesus. How does it measure up to how much God has loved you and me? How much? Does it reflect some way of trying to define the balance? Now, I understand the concept. We can't ever balance that out. But our lives can reflect the values that are still there. And so Paul is asking them to do that very thing. Put your life on the balance scale and see if it's worth what God paid for it. The worst punishment that a child can receive, for instance, is to hear a father and mother say, "I'm really surprised at how you acted right there. I thought we raised you better than that." That's worse than a beating for most kids. But it's at that moment that a child will start living better to a higher standard because now he is aware of how out of sync he is. Once told that you live up or down, you'll change somehow. So God gives them this standard against which they can judge the living. And we have to confront ourselves, same idea, with a single question. Does my life reflect the same measure of devotion that Jesus paid for my life? Does it balance? And so with that one grand sweep of a hand, Paul changes the frame. But now it's time to get down to specifics. How do you walk in the church? How do you conduct your life in the church? How do we together live together to achieve the high calling of God? It comes down to some interesting things. First of all, consider what the church is. One of the truths that you learn in ministry is that Christians, no matter how godly they think they are, we're all still people with different viewpoints, different personality, and strange behaviors. At least everyone's not just like us. Those differences cause the friction in most churches. We ask the question, I don't understand what's wrong with them. Why can't they act like me? I know what I do, and I know that I'm right. That's the human concept in ourselves. And so we start attributing motives to others that when we feel slighted, they must not care. Language which gets twisted into insults, and it becomes something God never intended. And trust me, I've been down that block too many times. And I'm sure others have done it with me as well. How do you handle the people problem in God's kingdom? Paul presents the foundations of all of our living together in God's family as relationships. So let's look at the big three that Paul teaches in this lesson. It starts with a paired concept of humility and gentleness. In verse 2, Paul says we need to approach our walk this way, with all humility and gentleness. Now it appears that Paul speaks of two different traits, but I put them together in this lesson for a good reason. They're kind of conjoined twins of attitude. Until Christianity arose, humility and gentleness were signs of weakness. Greeks would never call themselves humble. They never called themselves gentle. Instead, if you had lowly thinking, you must be servile. You must be a servant. You couldn't be strong. You don't have the manliness to handle life if you're humble, if you're lowly in your thought patterns. And yet, Christianity reshaped all of that. It was Jesus who took those words and wrapped them around his life and the lives of his followers. This is what he told people. Listen carefully. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Did you hear him say, I am gentle and lowly in heart? Those are the same exact words that Paul uses here. Jesus describes himself in those terms, but what do they mean? What do they indicate? A humble person sizes themselves up against God and not others. Now, it's easy to compare ourselves with other people because we become a giant, at least in our own eyes. We're much better than they are. We're more moral than they are. We're more compassionate than they are. And we use this scale of, we look at the worst and compare ourselves to them, and so that always elevates us in stature. But if you were to see yourself in comparison with God, then you see your true miniature size. When we can right size ourselves, we're going to be humble. But the second trait is often translated, especially in the Beatitudes, as meek. Meekness is mousy and easily manipulated. At least that's what we think. It doesn't have a real solid reputation. And tragically, I think we've arrived at that idea wrongly because it's really a very strong word. Aristotle called it the midpoint between anger and apathy. You never get too angry, but at the same time, it's not that you don't care. I think if you go back to a place like John 8, in John 8, you can see it pretty clearly. The Jewish leaders bring this woman to Jesus who's been caught in the very act of adultery. Now, where was the man in all of that? We don't know. It seems like this is a targeted concept. But they demanded of Jesus that he declare his allegiance, either to law or compassion, but not to both. You're either going to stone her, as the law says, or you're going to ignore the law. So which is it? You know the story. Jesus never did dismiss the sin, but only the attitude that brought the woman there. That shows what gentleness truly is. Meekness gets indignant at wrongs done to others and the resulting suffering others have to go through. But it's not moved to anger because I'm personally insulted. Think about that. You care more about other people than you do yourself. That is the strength of meekness. That's the strength that says, I am comfortable having God judge me, but I want to help you in your distress. See, Paul says, you're not slaves of self, but only to right and wrong. That's what makes this the golden trait that seems to be so elusive to the emotions of humanity. The next trait is a trait called patience. Now, patience, we believe, is the lack of the ability to to wait for something to get done. We tensely tap our foot while we're standing in line at Walmart as the checkout line and the express line tops 100 people, and it's going to take us 25 minutes to get through that line, and we just don't have the time, and so we are impatient. That's how we kind of see this whole concept. But again, it's unfortunate that we have put this overlay on this spiritually regal term. The old word is the literal one. It means long-suffering. Now, long-suffering simply removes the heat of the situation. It can wait for resolution. It sees beyond how I feel for the moment to where we both need to be in the future. The long-suffering person can solve a problem, not feel better. He reduces personal hurt because he sees the greater need to maintain a brother in Christ. I want you to think about those three traits, because the truth is people are aggravating, aren't they? Now, I know I'm not, and I know you're not, but I've heard the church has aggravating people in it, haven't you? They can be stubborn and willful. They can say awful things and they can hurt feelings. And these three traits are like the fire hose that puts out the blaze in a relationship. Think about what would happen if you calmed down and tried to understand instead of reacting with upset. You listen to someone. You hear the pain of their life. You can empathize and realize how hard their life has been and how blessed you are. See, that's how relationships mend, when we truly understand and are compassionate and loving to people. And it's only by reflecting on what Jesus did to us can we live together in the body. Which brings us to what keeps us together. When I was a young preacher, I read a lot of books by a man named Lyle Shower. Shower started off as a city planner, but he became intrigued by local churches and how they grew and how they didn't, how they operated or how they didn't. Which ones were peaceful, which ones were rowdy, which ones were dying, and which ones were living. Out of all those books, and I think I read almost 30 books of his, I remember one idea precisely. Shower observed that in every church there is a glue that holds everything together. And if you lose the glue, the church falls apart. And over the years, I've watched that happen to a lot of congregations. People died, or they moved away, and suddenly relationships were no longer there, and the glue was loosened. A beloved preacher leaves, and the glue is loosened. The excitement of building a new building ends when the ribbon gets cut and the glue is loosened. People become part of congregations for their children, but once they grow up and leave home, the parents drift away because the glue has been loosened. And so, indeed, God's glue is a lot more substantial than these, whether it be friendships, whether it be building projects, whether it be a preacher, or whether it be your kids. God's glue is bigger than that because he wants to create a tie that binds. Paul speaks of glue, the glue of the church, in verse 3. He says, "Be eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace." The bond of peace, that's the glue. The word refers to something that holds things together. And he said, you have to show diligence. You have to go to a lot of effort. You have to work at that to keep the glue in place. Because the glue can be loosened so easily. And we need something potent that won't change. Now, when I was in high school, I had a part-time job at a pharmacy, and one day we received a new product that was called super glue. The maker purported that it would glue anything together permanently. Now, I had a skeptical coworker who said, it'll never work, and he's pretty rash, and so he grabbed the bottle, opened it, squeezed a drop on his index finger, and pressed it against his thumb. That's when he realized he was in trouble. He started trying to pull them apart, and it didn't come off. He went over to the sink, ran hot water over it. It didn't come off. He tried everything he could. And finally, the pharmacist said, I don't only know of one thing that's going to melt that. And he says, that's a corrosive called acetone. So he poured a little acetone over it, and it finally came loose. But the truth is, he didn't have to worry about the FBI taking a fingerprint anytime soon. That was for sure. God puts super glue in the church, the things that hold us together. And they're not personal, they're not our feelings, they're not the moment, they're something He created that is true in all time, that holds the church together as a family, as one body. For the church to be one, it has to be one in its glue. So 7 times in 4 verses, you hear the percussive drumbeat of one. Let's look at what holds the body together. The church is the only body that Christ really has. It's a body that's comprised, as we've seen, of both Jew and Gentile, slave and free, male and female. To accomplish the purpose of one man, God creates one body. Today, distinctions are different, but the reality is the same. We're still one body, whether it's black or white, or whether we speak English or Spanish, or whether we meet in a jungle or in an air-conditioned church building. We have one body. Not two, not separate, not those that say, we're part of this and you're part of that, and we'll accept you as God's people, but we're a little bit different. One body. But he also goes to say, you also have one Spirit. From the beginning of the church, the Holy Spirit invaded its work and life. We receive the Holy Spirit at baptism, according to Acts chapter 2. He helps in our weaknesses, which is what Paul says in Romans chapter 8. And He's the guaranteed deed of the promise of God. And without the Spirit, the church becomes aimless and impotent. But we only have one, the one God gives. And so we have to follow that Spirit. But we also have just one hope. We all share the hope, the same hope, of going to heaven to live with God in the church. We encourage each other this way because we don't want any man left behind, if you will. It becomes the rudder of our faith, and we set our course for the future ahead on the basis of the hope that we have for eternity. Because we want to ask this basic question, where will we end up together? We also have but one Lord. We know to whom to bow our knees. You see, Christ governs the church. Christ is the head of the church. His will is supreme, trumping the desires of any human being, whether in the church or out of the church. We listen only to one voice. Not 2, not 3, not even people who want to say, I am the voice of Christ. We listen to Christ. See, our allegiance is to Jesus, not to some self-appointed representative, because if we start listening to the voice of man rather than the voice of the Lord, we're going to go our separate ways. It has happened for the last 2,000 years that way. The wreckage of history is about men who have followed men, and rather than listening to the Lord Himself. But then Paul goes on to talk about there's one faith. Now this term is objective. Faith is a standard of belief. It's what we rest our lives on as accurate, genuine, and dependable. Now, tragically today, men are making faith a buffet of ideas. Decide what fits you. You don't have to have everything. Just find out what you like and go find that and go do that. One of the real problems with Christendom today is people say, well, I don't like that church. I can go over here to this church because they'll give me what I want. Whenever you start to pander to people, you lose the one faith. It's simple as that. When there is no standard left, or whether it's shifting or floating, if there is no standard upon which to rest our lives, the glue becomes water and just evaporates. You're not together as one body. It's just a word at that point. And then he says there's one baptism. Now this item is probably most obvious to us since we practice baptism by immersion for the forgiveness of sins. And when we witness Christianity, we witness a Christianity that has wrestled baptism into an entangled Gordian's knot. And as Alexander the Great, in his great exasperation, did, he just cut the knot in half rather than untying it. And today, baptism is a moving target. Is it essential, recommended, or optional? Does it wash away sin, or is it just an expression of faith that can't really do anything for anybody? Is it a dip, a drop, or a dumb idea? Now we can see how central the role baptism played simply by going through the picture book of the New Testament. If you go to Acts, for instance, you stand around a pool in Jerusalem on Pentecost, praying with 3,000 new Christians still dripping wet from coming out of that pool. Or we're crouching behind a chariot, watching a nobleman from Ethiopia going down into an oasis pond. Or we're in a darkened corner of a dark room as a blind Saul grapples with what he has seen. And we hear a voice of a man saying, "Arise and be baptized. Wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord." Now, many examine this list and they see this one as the zebra in the Kentucky Derby. It just doesn't seem to fit with the vaulted ideas, the lordship of Jesus, the power of the Holy Spirit, and the fatherhood of God. But it's not odd. It's not out of place. It's absolutely essential. Now I want you to stop for a moment and I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to think about your baptism. Now open your eyes. If I ask everyone watching this to share the story of their baptism, we all can tell the same kind of story. Oh, a few little details are different. The place we were, the preacher that preached. But everything else is a common experience. And nothing ties us together as much as the common experience of baptism. When all of us can say, I've done the same thing that you have. I've been to the same place that you have. I have felt the same thing that you have. That's a glue that binds really tight. And don't dismiss it. For God made it as important as the Holy Spirit and the faith in keeping the church together. But the final seems to be kind of a duh in this chapter. The God and Father of all. But I think it's essential to hear the entire phrase that Paul uses. One God and Father of all, who is over all, and through all, and in all. Families are bound together in the blood that flows through their veins. A father defines the family. He is over the family of God. God works through his family. He is the father. And it's woven into the spiritual DNA that's part of what makes all of us a child of God. Step back for a moment. Let's find out what that means. Now, while the world produces barriers that separate people, God puts values in the church which we share. And we have things in common. Things in common with all of them. Even though it's been 2 millennia ago, we have something in common with all those people at Ephesus that Paul wrote this letter to. We just upgraded our society, but we still in the church have the same things in common. Whether you were a Gentile baptized into Christ in Antioch or a Nigerian coming up out of a muddy river or an American submerged into a heated baptistry in an exquisite building, it's all the same. And God has put all these things together to remove the barriers of culture and heritage We are one not because we go to the same building at the same time. We are one because we have the same Father who has paid for it all. We are the family of God. You know, Paul's just scratching the surface. His introductory salvo. But what he starts in this lesson will become the foundation upon which he will build the remaining instructions about accomplishing God's purposes. But I think it's vital to see the central truth of this one passage, that the body is a body created by God, not an organization created by men. God builds bridges and doors into his family, while men build walls and barricades to keep other people out and to keep themselves in. God is the one who made the church to be what it is. And you see it best in this passage. Several years ago, our family at Christmas time went to see an exhibit called Body Worlds. Body Worlds is an interesting place. It's kind of strange. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's basically a cadaver with the skin removed. And the body has been plasticized, best way I can explain it. And it's fascinating because when you take the skin off, you see how the body works, not how it looked. And I remember that as we walked through that, my youngest daughter was getting a college degree in biology, and everybody else had these headsets on, and they were listening to the narration in them. And my daughter, I was too cheap to spend $25 a head to do it. And so my daughter just goes on and says, well, you see this here, this does this, and this. Pretty soon it was kind of interesting. People began to crowd in, and they took their headsets off and they listened to her because she was describing how a body works in ways that they hadn't understood. And now, as I reflected on that exhibit of athletes, old men, and babies, all in different states without the skin on, I realized something profound, and it's simple, that we miss so badly in the church. The strength of a body is on the inside, not the outside. Too often I think we think the church is strong because of organizations and programs. Because it doesn't get its strength, but it doesn't get its strength from all of that. Those are kind of fluff things in a sense. The strength is beneath the surface. It has strength, not necessarily looks. No wonder the world despises it, because it doesn't look attractive. It just is the family of God, because God made the insides to be strong. We're joined together, and we drive our lives from the same root. I grew up in the mountains of northern New Mexico, where the deepest forest of aspen trees would flourish. They would just cover the hillsides. Mountains would go up to 10,000, 12,000 feet. And on those hillsides were these aspen trees. They'd be green in the summer. Come fall is when they would really put on their show. They would turn to a sunshine yellow and a burnt orange. And they would flutter in the breeze, almost like sequins shining in a spotlight. Hundreds of trees hugging the hillsides. And they could withstand the snows of winter or the hurricane forces of storms that would roll across the mountains. But you know what gives an aspen its strength? Beneath the surface, when you go down into the soil, they grow off a single root. Their root system is fed by one, and together they blend together, and their strength is together by one root. They are intertwined in this taproot. And that's what gives them nourishment, and that's what gives them endurance. And we do like the aspen, is that we have a single root. The root is Jesus and His Word. It is the faith and the Father and the Spirit and the baptism. That's what gives us our life. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad you could come today and as we studied together. And I hope as you continue through this day, you'll just have a wonderful day. I'll see you again next Sunday. Have a great day.